The majority of characters in Hollywood are based on individuals we've never met, but occasionally a character who is a bit too familiar, too detailed, or both is penned. That's what occurred when a fresh legal drama began circulating in early 2024. Script that is anonymous one-word title for prestige studio Obsidian, the pitch of fiery, intelligent, morally unwavering international attorney torn between the courtroom and international diplomacy. They referred to her as the counselor. Nobody gave it much mind at first, but after seeing the early character notes, mood board, styling breakdown, and one question that was shared across 3 agencies and a very secret group chat, someone did. The background scene, the voice, the hair, the case history, and the actor playing her weren't just similar. They were identical. Is this Amal? Blake Lively is Blake Lively's latest script just me? Or Obsidian is modeled on Amal Clooney, all the way down to the UN speech rhythm? It's almost fanfiction. There was no biopic here. It was Amal and not permitted. Blake never claimed it was about her. Instead, she played it straight. When George learned, the silent retaliation that ensued wasn't only personal, it was surgical. She hadn't even been approached. Even George Clooney, who has created, directed, and lived stories, wasn't prepared to witness his wife in a script that she never approved. It took place in a private screening room in London and featured early Obsidian preview footage. 10 minutes into the video, George paused the remote replay to watch Blake Lively give a monologue on foregoing motherhood for diplomacy after being requested to provide the director with some lighthearted thoughts as a favor. It wasn't merely recognizable. It was a word-for-word fictionalization of Amal's 2016 UN panel quote. He made a silent call instead of completing the screening. Not to Blake, the studio, or his legal team, as it is not a compliment when someone portrays your wife without your consent. Trespassing is what it is. The following day, a few things subtly changed. In studio trackers, the title of the script was modified. One email from the casting office leaked, and the director's name was discreetly taken off of press kits. Eliminate Amalesque details for the time being, keep Blake on board. It seems that Blake's new role was inspired by Al Clooney, and after seeing the script, George decided to tone it down while still keeping her involved. That's crazy. George was not finished, though, as one thing became very evident. Not only had Blake broken a boundary, but she had also entered someone else's life. If George Clooney is skilled at anything, it's rewriting a conclusion.
And just a reminder, every deleted tweet, fake statement, and PR cover-up takes hours to piece together. If you want to help this channel keep going, hit that join button and become a member. We'll keep exposing what they won't.
The threat was not made by George Clooney. He didn't give Blake a call or even mention her name, but 3 days after that screening, an odd incident occurred. A casting call was unsuccessful. An invitation to the Met Gala was extended after a producer abandoned a Blake Lively fashion biopic. Not due to controversy or news reports, but rather to a private utterance. George was not pleased with what he saw. There are rumors that due to a negative relationship with a certain power producer, Blake Lively was surreptitiously dismissed from 2 high-profile projects this week. It was business-related rather than personal, because when someone like George Clooney betrays your trust, you're disconnected rather than blacklisted. It works and is more subtly lasting. Insiders began referring to it as the gray list. Not confirmed or formal, just a silent step back that nobody ever comes back from. Blake also sensed it. The calls became less frequent. The offerings changed. More brand advertisements, fewer dramas. Her name appeared in industry roundtables. Additionally, the response that her publicist sent to a director connected to George's smokehouse photos was removed. Not this quarter. This tone wasn't one of rejection. It was a message. George Clooney is renowned for his poise, charisma, and timing, for understanding when to talk and when to let quiet do the heavy lifting. He is not known for his mess. Therefore, nobody anticipated that he would address the claims when he sat down for a rare interview with the Hollywood Round. They were discussing the future of storytelling as well as new and legacy projects. "Do you believe image can be weaponized in Hollywood?" the journalist then asked. "Yeah, I've seen people model entire performances after someone they met once at a dinner party," George added after pausing to giggle softly. "It's not acting, it's mimicry. And it turns into stealing, if you're not careful." George Clooney said, "Modeling performances after dinner party guests isn't acting, it's theft." He didn't name anyone, but the table fell silent. It feels like a really particular tint. When the extended version went public online, that clip became viral even though the comment wasn't in the initial edit or advertised in the teaser. In just 6 hours, the phrase, "mimicry isn't acting," topped Twitter search results and comments. Is he referring to Blake? George just pulled a Reese, and this is the most courteous takedown I've ever seen. That line wasn't a coincidence. It was computed, because the business had already determined that she wasn't only imitating when George eventually spoke, but rather climbing and stomping on people to achieve it, and the man she attempted to win over was done acting. Reframing the story is something Blake Lively has always been skilled at. She doesn't post angry threads or lash out. She sets up an interview for her profile. People thought she was finally going to address the rumors when a new cover piece for Elle magazine was revealed. The cover said it all. "I have no regrets." The statement, "I think women are so often accused of manipulation when really we're just navigating a room full of expectations," appeared after the feature images of Blake dressed in muted hues, seated in a Parisian loft and posed like a confused genius. It was ambiguous. It was polished. It was intended to give her a strong appearance, but instead it sparked a whole counter-narrative. Blake Lively was accused of literally mimicking Amal Clooney's demeanor, so she wasn't playing the misunderstood woman card. This cannot be made up. A leaked agency memo including a casting pre-approval sheet for a future streaming political drama began making the rounds in group conversations just 24 hours after the release of the Elle movie. There were 3 names listed. 2 had green light on them. Do not proceed with the one redlined next to Blake's name. Note the unresolved Clooney fallout as a volatility risk. That was the last straw since this was career harm rather than public theater. After her panel invitations remained ignored and an industry site posted the title, "The Blake Lively Glow-Up has expired," producers began discreetly replacing her. Even her team fell silent. The industry believed it was finished. Blake was no longer involved with the project. Her press tour was a bust. The Elle interview. Her stylist discreetly canceled 2 brand partners and postponed 3 planned shoots, but Amal didn't respond. Instead, she constructed because Amal was finishing together a campaign, not for Vogue or Hulu, but for the Clooney Foundation for Justice, that would conceal the entire story while Blake was sharing carefully chosen lines about boundaries. Amal Clooney spoke in Geneva in May 2024. The topic of women's exposure and media abuse in the contemporary era, "When They Borrow Your Face," is the title of the photographs behind her black and white stills of phony ads, alongside actresses rebranding themselves as activists, and one instantly identifiable image of Blake Lively on a panel wearing a tan trousers suit that Amal had worn at the UN 6 months earlier were the only things mentioned. No names, no rumors, and no quotations. There was silence in the room as Amal said her last words. Nothing is more harmful than a woman who views empathy as a fashion accessory. Amal Clooney's "When They Borrow Your Face" keynote just ended, and I'm in tears. That one sentence wasn't just a response. It was a message to every producer, editor, and actor who had watched this happen and remained silent because, in the end, Amal didn't need to take Blake down. She just needed the world to see her, and once they did, they couldn't unsee it. That statement regarding empathy, as an accessory, it was for Blake. That was for everyone. The speech ought to have been a brief, but impactful keynote and elegant response. However, what followed wasn't elegant. It was surgical since Blake had been subtly working on a Hulu Originals project that was canceled less than 48 hours after Amal's speech. No announcement. There was only one leaked screenshot from an internal review board, no email blast. There was no blacklist. It was a murmur. Once believed to be safe PR, Blake was now a liability as one passed between partners, sponsors, and producers. There was little fallout. Her name ceased to appear in pitches. Her stylist put branding talks on hold. Additionally, Blake's upcoming article with Amal Clooney was subtly switched by 2 prominent fashion magazines because of her humanitarian efforts rather than her red carpet attire. Due to Blake's attempt to appropriate Amal's style, Amal never took anything from Blake and didn't reply till she With only one Instagram post, no tag, no caption, a broad view of the back of her head carrying a document into the UN, the legitimacy of the exposed tab is not branding. Moreover, 300,000 people reposted that picture, and nobody backed Blake in any of the comment sections. Amal Clooney just used one picture to ruin a whole public relations campaign. No shade and no caption, simply being there, and Blake completely wiped because Amal ultimately waited for the story to come to light on her own without speaking up or leaking it, and Blake wasn't fired. The actual thing took her place.